Well, obviously, I think I'm best known for being the singer and the keyboard player in the rock group Styx. I think more than anything, that's what people know me as. Picture this. 1979, Styx is playing Madison Square Garden. Tens of thousands of fans are singing along to Dennis DeYoung's soaring voice on Come Sail Away. Lights are flashing, the energy is electric, and the band seems to be on top of the world. But backstage, cold stares, silent wars, broken trust. While DeYoung was the voice of the band, he was slowly becoming the outsider. Now, after decades of silence, Dennis DeYoung is no longer holding back. What he reveals about Styx isn't just shocking, it changes everything fans thought they knew about the band. In the early days, Styx was a dream born in the streets of Chicago. DeYoung, his brother-in-law John Kurolowski, and the Panozzo brothers laid the foundation. Then came Tommy Shaw, the spark that would ignite both success and division. DeYoung was intense, focused, a visionary. He wasn't just a keyboard player. He was the band's architect. He had a taste for the dramatic, for grand concepts, for perfection. But this creative drive soon became a wedge. Tommy Shaw and James J.Y. Young didn't want Broadway. They wanted blistering guitars and classic rock energy. Rehearsals turned into battlegrounds. Decisions turned into fights. The harmony on stage masked the war behind it. In 1983, Styx stood at the edge of transformation and destruction. With Kilroy was here, Dennis DeYoung wasn't just writing music. He was crafting a rock opera, a theatrical rebellion against censorship and conformity. Synth-heavy, dramatic, conceptual, it was everything DeYoung dreamed of. But to Tommy Shaw and James Young, it felt like a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. DeYoung poured his soul into Kilroy, scripting dystopian characters, building elaborate stage productions, and demanding theatrical acting from bandmates who never signed up to be actors. Tommy Shaw in particular felt suffocated, not just creatively, but personally. Once the rock and roll firebrand of the group, he now found himself dressed in a costume, reciting scripted lines, and miming out DeYoung's futuristic fantasies under blinding lights. The tension backstage was volcanic. Shaw reportedly became withdrawn and moody, no longer recognizing the band he once loved. He spiraled into depression. Young grew increasingly frustrated with DeYoung's obsession with control. What should have been rehearsals turned into rehearsed arguments. Every soundcheck felt like a battlefield. Every show a forced performance. Fans were confused. Critics were divided. Internally, Styx was on fire, but not in a good way. On stage, they played like a unit. Off stage, they traveled in silence, staying in separate hotels, riding in separate vehicles, and barely making eye contact. The bond that once held them together had disintegrated into ego, fear, and bitterness. And, I said sometimes in life, as you mature and get older, if you have a dream, sometimes your dreams need to shift. If a certain dream isn't working, then during the tour, things exploded. Arguments turned vicious. Physical confrontations nearly erupted. Shaw, emotionally exhausted and creatively stifled, couldn't take it anymore. He walked away, not just from the album, but from the band. The split was swift and it was brutal. Kilroy was meant to elevate Styx to another artistic level. Instead, it cracked them in two. The album that symbolized DeYoung's artistic ambition became the symbol of the band's unraveling. What once made Styx daring and unique, DeYoung's larger-than-life vision, now made him a target. And in the fallout, Dennis DeYoung stood alone. Not as a hero, not as a leader, but as a man blamed for destroying the very thing he helped build. By the late 1990s, the buzz among fans was deafening. Whispers of a Styx reunion were circulating, and people were desperate to see the classic lineup, especially Dennis DeYoung, take the stage again. After all, he had been the band's heart and soul, its original visionary. DeYoung, now recovering from illness and ready to return, truly believed it was time to rebuild the brotherhood. He waited, he hoped. But what came next would destroy any remaining trust he had in the people he once called friends. Instead of picking up the phone or offering a hand, Tommy Shaw and James Young made a decision behind closed doors to keep Styx going without its founding voice. And not just that, they hired a new frontman, someone who could imitate Dennis's signature voice, replicate his theatrical gestures, and sing his songs note for note. It wasn't about innovation. It was about replacement. It was cold, calculated, and corporate. And it hit DeYoung like a dagger. Fans were stunned. Headlines read like betrayal. The man who gave Styx its identity, its biggest hits, and its sound was no longer welcome. The betrayal was complete when the band began touring under the name Styx, performing classics like Babe, The Best of Times, and Come Sail Away, all written or co-written by DeYoung, without a single acknowledgement of the man who wrote them. DeYoung watched it all happen from the sidelines, at home, alone, still healing from his illness, still believing, foolishly, some might say, that they would call, that they would do the right thing. But instead he was treated like a liability, a burden, a name they no longer needed. He tried to reach out, tried to understand, but there was no room for peace, no interest in resolution. What had started as creative differences in the 80s had now turned into an emotional blood feud. Legal disputes soon followed, arguments over the use of the name, over songwriting credits, over performance rights. Every lawsuit, every lawyer's letter added another layer of bitterness. Interviews turned venomous. Words like ego, control freak, and delusional were tossed around in the press. The damage was irreversible. And so, while the band marched forward with a carefully curated image and a new era, DeYoung faded into the shadows, not by choice, but by force. His legacy, once loud and bright, was being rewritten in real time, not with truth, but with silence. For DeYoung, the betrayal wasn't just professional. It was deeply, cuttingly personal, and it would haunt him for decades. While Styx's name continued to fill venues, DeYoung was trapped in a silent war, not just against his former bandmates, but against his own body. In the late 1990s, his life came to a terrifying halt when he developed a mysterious illness. He became hypersensitive to light, unable to perform, record, or even leave his house without feeling sick and disoriented. Months passed in darkness, quite literally, blinds closed, lights off, and music silenced. And that's when it happened. At his weakest, when he was most vulnerable, the remaining members of Styx made a decision that shattered him. They moved on without him. He wasn't just left behind. He was replaced. While he lay in recovery, physically and emotionally broken, the machine marched on. His voice, his face, his identity were sidelined and pushed into the shadows. And that pain went far deeper than any illness. The music industry, always driven by momentum, didn't wait for him. Agents stopped calling. Promoters ghosted him. Venues backed out of solo plans. His name, once a staple on marquees, was now considered too risky, too complicated. He went from a headlining star to a ghost in his own story. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The people who had once been like brothers acted as if he were disposable. And as the Styx brand continued to thrive without him, he was forced to watch from the sidelines, his legacy paraded around without acknowledgement or gratitude. Depression crept in. His marriage suffered under the weight of anxiety, confusion, and emotional collapse. There were days when he reportedly refused to get out of bed. Music, once his salvation, became a source of grief. Even playing piano felt like reopening wounds. But DeYoung is not a man who breaks quietly. As time passed, he began to fight back, not with lawsuits or bitterness, but with art. He began writing again, slowly. At first, he experimented with theater, composed new songs, and crafted stories that reflected the heartbreak he endured. From pain came creativity. From betrayal came resilience. Still, the scars remained. Even years later, when he spoke publicly, there was a heaviness in his words, the weight of being erased from something he built with his own hands. His illness may have faded, but the memory of being discarded when he was most human, most broken, never truly healed. DeYoung's fire didn't extinguish when Styx pushed him aside. It simply redirected. But the same intensity that made him a genius on stage became a liability behind closed doors. Once Styx was no longer his battlefield, his conflict spread far and wide, into boardrooms, production meetings, and even his own home. He battled record label executives who tried to control his solo image when they wanted him to soften his theatrical edge. He refused. One executive reportedly called him unmanageable. Producers on various projects, from studio albums to stage productions, often walked away drained and disillusioned. He brought the same drive and obsession for perfection to every note, every lighting cue, every costume, and not everyone could keep up. When he dove into musical theater in the 1990s and early 2000s, DeYoung hoped to reinvent himself. His rock musical, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, gained a cult following, but insiders whispered about grueling rehearsals, rewrites, and DeYoung's refusal to take direction. Some admired his vision, others found it unbearable. Collaborations often ended in frustration. For DeYoung, compromise felt like betrayal. The conflicts didn't stop at the stage door. Within his family, long-buried resentments over money, inheritance, and career choices began to surface. There were arguments over business decisions, over loyalty, and over who truly supported him. His deep obsession with his legacy, with being remembered the right way, became all-consuming. At times it overtook everything else. He could be warm and charismatic one day and cold and confrontational the next. Close friends began to pull away. Some stopped returning calls. Others quietly distanced themselves, unable to watch him spiral deeper into isolation. Those who remained saw a man fighting ghosts, the betrayal from Styx, the indifference of the industry, the silence from once trusted allies. The louder he fought for recognition, the lonelier it got around him. In his attempt to control the narrative of his own story, DeYoung found himself pushing away the very people who once stood by him. It was no longer just a battle for musical respect. It was a war to be seen, heard, and remembered. And it came with a cost that no gold record could erase. Today, Dennis DeYoung stands at a strange crossroads, worshipped by generations of fans, but permanently cast aside by the very band he co-founded and shaped. His solo records continue to earn praise. His ballads are still played at weddings. His voice remains instantly recognizable, iconic, and yet, when Styx walks on stage today, it's as if he never existed. Behind the admiration lies a sea of personal grief. DeYoung didn't just lose a band. He lost brothers. What once felt like a family turned into a cold machine. Shaw and Young, once creative partners, now seem like ghosts from a past life, unreachable and emotionally gone. They don't speak, they don't respond. There's no apology, no closure, just silence and the sting of erasure. And yet the betrayal didn't crush him, not completely. He retreated. He mourned. But he also created. He poured the pain into music, solo projects, orchestral tours, and storytelling. Every note he sings today is laced with a deeper truth, a man trying to reclaim not just his name, but his legacy. He built Styx from a Chicago basement. He gave it heart, drama, and voice. And though others may continue under that banner, they can't erase the fingerprints he left on every album, every lyric, every note. Now, with time closing in and the stage lights dimming, DeYoung is speaking openly. The pain, the betrayal, the exile, it's all coming out, not for revenge, but for truth. Because the final curtain isn't just about endings. It's about legacy, and Dennis DeYoung refuses to let his be rewritten by silence.